So we built a sauna in a horse box. And it turned out pretty good. There was many questions, one of them being, why do it in the first place? Well, let's fast forward 1,000 miles later to the Isle of Skye to explain.
So I mentioned in the first video about completing the Holy Trilogy, or the Holy Trinity, of British saunaing: nature, hot, cold. So let's start with the first one, and probably the most relevant one today, and that is the cold. Oh yeah, and we haven't quite finished the sauna yet, so quickly gonna do the last few bits.
Skye is lovely and peaceful, isn't it?
You know what, mate? I came here for the peace and quiet. It's beautiful.
So we hitched up the sauna and headed to the fairy pools of Skye for a quick dip to talk about cold exposure.
Now you've probably heard of all the benefits of cold exposure, from improving circulation, metabolism, to reducing inflammation, increasing mental focus, and raising your immunity. Aside from these health benefits, there's the mental aspect of getting cold. It's uncomfortable. We have to make ourselves get in there and want to do it. In fact, if you want to go detailed when it comes to cold exposure, I recommend checking out Andrew Huberman's podcast, along with a host of others such as Wim Hof, for fantastic information, who are much more of an expert than I am. The most important thing is that we actually do it. Here are a couple of practical recommendations. First of all, we have intensity. Cold is subjective. Not everyone feels it equally, and some people are much more susceptible. As tempting as it is to go crack open a lake covered with ice and hop straight in, it's much the same as going to the gym and squatting 200 kilos on your first day. It's probably going to be too intense for you. We can start by simply turning the shower cold at the end. If you're particularly susceptible to the cold, you can even try just dunking your face into ice water. Much like any training, we can build this up over time and increase our resilience to it. I really like, again, Andrew Huberman's recommendation of 11 minutes per week, because this translates basically to 2 minutes at the end of a daily shower. It's nice, simple, and easy to work into your routine. Aside from that, time should be relative to the intensity of the cold exposure. A good recommendation is to stay in for 1 minute per Celsius, but as always, you should just get out when you feel too cold. Most importantly, we need to enjoy it. I would recommend getting some friends, perhaps going for a sea swim in winter. Suffering is always better when it's shared. But as you can see, that was amazing, but also really, really cold. So you kind of now want to get warm, which leads you on to the next part. And that is with hot, or in this case, the sauna, or as it should be pronounced, the sauna. I didn't really appreciate the extent of sauna culture until I visited Helsinki in 2020. I managed to experience a few different places, and it was genuinely one of the highlights of the trip. And this is what led to the inspiration for this, to try and bring a little bit of that culture back to the UK. Now, this isn't a video on Finnish sauna culture because, well, I'm not Finnish, but it's certainly more than just sitting in a hot wooden box. In fact, there are over 2 million saunas in Finland with a population of 5.3 million people. That's some serious ratios. On the contrary to cold exposure, saunas are pretty damn enjoyable, or certainly a much more tolerable form of suffering, and it makes that cold that much more inviting. Not only this, but it comes with a host of health benefits, like cold exposure. I'm going to leave that down to the professionals, and I'd recommend checking out, again, Andrew Huberman for some great practical recommendations on this. But here are the headlines. Reduced risk of dementia, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, and all-cause mortality, as well as improvements in chronic pain, depression, and sports performance. There are many well-studied benefits that the sauna can produce, but it should be noted that many of these are done with high-frequency exposures, often between 4 to 7 times per week, with a time of about 15 to 20 minutes. But you will still get some benefits with lesser exposure. So I think really the recommendation here is to get in the sauna wherever possible. Originally, I would just use the sauna at the gym, and I'd sit in there for about 15 minutes at the end of my training session. It's some good benefits for minimal extra time invested. I also had a cheap infrared sauna which I used at home, and it was pretty effective, but it looked equally ridiculous. Now we've got the even more ridiculous trailer trash spa, so we can take some saunas in some epic locations. Now, being a bit ridiculous, going to some epic places has kind of just been the main inspiration for this trip, and that is to get out in nature, which is point number 3 of this whole thing. To put this into some context, Brits spend on average 90% of their time indoors, and I'm sure this is probably similar for most developed countries. That's 22 hours of your day. Obviously you've got sleep, and we know there are health consequences to spending more time inside. You know, from the exposure to artificial light, to indoor air pollutants, and also avoidance in sun exposure. I think if you try to spend more of your time outside, it's certainly not going to have negative effects on your health. I know sometimes the weather isn't super nice. We're in Scotland. It's definitely not always sunny. There's usually some rain, there's usually some cloud, it's usually a bit cold. I understand that for many, a lot of this limitation is going to be around the fact that you have to work, you have to earn a living, you have to be in a certain place 9 to 5. But on that time outside of that, try to get outside a little bit more. Maybe instead of going to the gym to train, let's go train outside at a park. That's one of the great benefits of bodyweight training. One of the things I love most is I can take it anywhere with minimal equipment. I really don't want this part or any of the video really to be preachy, because it's not intended to be that. It's more of like an invitation. There's like these things I have found provide some real value in my life. There's some good scientific backing for all of them, and I'm sure if many of you just gave it a go, then you would feel some benefit, and ultimately that's kind of the reason that I make these videos. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys if you actually are going to give some or any of this a go, or maybe if you have some suggestions for the other people watching, join the discussion and let us all know in the comment section down below. This entire video, she's been sat here like, throw the stick! So this is basically the final day in Scotland. We're just about to take the sauna and Tim to go film one final video for this trip, which again will be on the channel. If you don't want to miss out on that one, make sure you hit that subscribe button, join the tribe. Right next to it is that thumbs up button as well, show that you enjoy these videos. But other than that, I'll catch you in the next one. Have a strong week.